Hello again, witches, seekers, and friends, and welcome to the Fat Feminist Witch Podcast, the show where we do a little ranting, raving, and wand waving. I'm your host, Paige Vanderbeck, and together we're going to explore magic and spirituality, social justice, the psychic realm, and truly modern witchcraft. Hello, my witchy friends, and thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Fat Feminist Witch Podcast. I know you have been waiting very patiently for months. I have been having a bit of a rough year, honestly. I needed to take some time off from the show so I could focus on a couple of books and also moving. So now I've written 2 books. Probably won't write another one for a little while just because it's a lot and I need some time. And I moved into a little house in the suburbs where for the first time in a very long time, I am not living alone. And I don't just mean because I've already made friends with all the stray cats in the neighborhood. I'm like living with other people. So there have been lots of changes, some good, some bad, all a little bit scary. And then I just kind of took on a little bit more work than I could handle. And honestly, my mental health suffered, and I ended up having a bit of a crisis of faith and also questioning if this job is really what I wanted to do. But I ended up comparing the work I do here on the show, on the podcast, with some of the other stuff, and I realized it really is my favorite. I get to research and share topics that I actually care about 100%. You know, I choose all of the topics. I get to decide that. I get to really get in depth and share like a mountain of information. You know, I can just completely take you guys down a rabbit hole with me. And there's no like minuscule word counts here that someone else is trying to keep me to. So I can I can share a little bit more. It can be as controversial as I want to, if I want to, or I can be silly, or I can be serious, you know, whatever it is. It's all good. It's my choice. So it's all very me. And so I'm excited to be back here on the show is basically what I'm saying. I'm very excited to be doing it again, and I've already got tons of really fun ideas. So hopefully that little bit of time off that I took was exactly what I needed. So today's episode actually features a special guest. I'm not here by myself. I have Sarah Robinson, the author of Yoga for Witches, and a new book called Witchin, on the show with me today. I'm very excited. So Sarah is going to talk to us about her new book about Witchin witchcraft, folklore, storytelling, and making magic accessible to everybody. Sarah and I actually recorded what you're going to hear back in May, right at the beginning of that really brutal Mercury retrograde there. And she was an absolute trooper because Mercury just, I mean, oh my God, my technology failed in a really big way. Everything seemed fine for a little while. And then suddenly we couldn't record anything. We couldn't connect. A piece of audio kept skipping even after we like signed out of our accounts on Zoom. We unplugged the machines, like we did everything. And for whatever reason, this little bit of audio would keep skipping. We couldn't get our computers. I couldn't get my computer anyway to do anything else. So the second half of the interview is actually Sarah by herself. She recorded herself responding to some of the questions that I wrote out in an email. And I absolutely love her for it because honestly, she was so great to talk to. That's the biggest shame here, is that she was awesome to talk to. She's really cool. She's really interesting. And I was really enjoying our conversation. So I was so disappointed when all of a sudden it came to this end. I also really liked the book. So Witchin is a new book. And it's pretty unique because it's not an instructional book of magic. And you'll hear me mention that in the interview a little bit more. Instead, it looks at the stories, mythology, and some of the history of kitchen and food magic, and the contributions to this work and to these particular types of stories, specifically by women, some that have maybe been forgotten or purposely left out. I don't think I really realized quite how focused on doing so many of the witch books that I've read and even written over the years have been. It was really, really nice to just sit and read and ponder magic and witchery without it being strictly fiction, but without having to get up and actually do something. You know what I mean? Just being there and reading the stories and enjoying them and reacting to them and feeling a certain way about everything I was reading was the witchiest thing I could do right in that moment. And especially with how I've been a little bit struggling with my practice, that is really needed. That really neat. That's really what I needed. That's really what I wanted. I wanted to feel like a witch even if I wasn't actively doing the witch stuff right that second, you know? So her book is very enjoyable, very pleasurable all the way through, but it doesn't shy away from tough stuff about how women have been purposely left out of history, out of magical history, out of kitchen history and kitchen success especially. So this was a really interesting interview, and I'm very excited to get to share it with you, even though it is a little bit different than what you might hear on the show usually. Usually, I talk more than anybody else, but this time I took a little bit of a back seat for half of it, and actually, that was probably a good thing, because she got a little bit more words in than some of my interviewees do. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Sarah Robinson, the author of Kitchen Witch. Excellent. Cool. Okay, so again, thank you so much for being on the show with me today, Sarah. I'm really excited to talk to you about kitchen witchery and all of your books and work. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It is a true honor.
I'm very excited. I loved Kitchen Witch. I remember when I first saw it on my library app on my tiny little phone, I saw the cover and I was like, whoa, what is that? And I realized that is exactly what happened with both of your two previous books as well. I saw the cover and I was like, well, this looks really fabulous. And it is. It's great. It's a fantastic book. It's so much fun. And I love your voice and your perspective in Kitchen Witch, in Yoga for Witches, and in Yin Magic. It's a very encouraging and comfortable vibe. You know, it really invites people in. And I love your combination of, your relationship with witchcraft and also the Eastern spirituality with Taoism and with yoga. And I've always wondered, what came first, the yoga or the witchcraft?
That's a good question. I suppose in my memory, it was yoga. I was about 7 when my mum took me to a kids' yoga class for the first time. And I have kind of vivid memories of that and how, yoga was really special for me as a child growing up. But then sort of this kind of, around the edges of that, I had quite a kind of pagan upbringing, would you call it? I suppose a kind of folksy upbringing, just because I grew up in an area of the west of England which is quite folksy anyway. There's a lot of myth and magic in this area anyway, so that was kind of just kind of me growing up in the kind of myth and story and music and that kind of beautiful culture. And it would take me a very long time to figure it out, but eventually, come 35 or whatever, I would be like, oh, these two passions of mine, these two kind of wonderful realms of the kind of the spirituality of the East and spirituality of the West, and how might we weave those respectfully together for our own practice and our own journey and our own finding of things. And yeah, all of the books are very much kind of like, here are some ideas, here are some questions. Yeah. Let's consider, it's very, very kind of open about the fact that it's kind of, these books are kind of my joyful journey of kind of exploring and asking questions about things and kind of, yeah, I'd love you to come along for the ride, but I'm not suggesting any, inspirational answers perhaps, but just some lovely ideas. And that's a really nice way to journey with it. And it is a journey. So it's nice to work with it in that way. Yeah, absolutely. It's a wonderful combination. There's easy to digest kind of sounds a little too scientific. It's more like it's easy to understand and it's easy to get excited about. After I read Yoga for Witches, I was like, I'm really going to have to take a second look at yoga here. And I started reading other books as well and learning more about the
the philosophy behind
Mm.
a lot of the, it's not just exercises or positions. There's a whole philosophy behind it. So it really encouraged me to look into that a little bit more deeply and, make some threads between my spirituality and theirs and see the common, the common threads there.
I mean, that is exactly that. It couldn't be a more perfect summary of what I was hoping for with Yoga for Witches, because it is, in the West, we are a little bit guilty, I think, sometimes of seeing yoga as just, striking a pose. It's exercise in a gym. It's a jazzy balance that you're doing on Instagram. And
Yeah.
that's not a terrible thing as such, but there's so much more. There's so much more to yoga than that. And if we can look a little bit deeper, maybe look a little bit under the surface, we're respecting the practice a lot more. We're really acknowledging, the wealth that is this beautiful practice of yoga.
Yes.
And then in doing that, like you did, you find those parallels between some of our practices and some of the Eastern practices, and kind of like, we're all seeking grounding, we're all seeking connection, and actually there's lots of similarities in the way we're seeking a certain magic. So that's always lovely. It always feels like a really nice moment where you feel like you've just, really discovered these connections, and you've discovered them for yourself, which is always really important to find your path and your kind of way with it is.
Right. I feel like sometimes, even though we're very connected online, we still seem to think of the rest of the world as incredibly separate from us. We very separate from us. It's completely different, but when you really get down to it, we're all very human, and we all have these same, yearnings and longings to discover deeper meaning to the world and to life. So I think that came through very well in your previous books. But I want to talk about Kitchen Witch, because this was, I remember when I first got the email and it said there's no recipes, I gasped out loud because I was so excited. And that shouldn't be so wild. It's just, lately many witch books, they're focused really on telling you how to practice. But this book is more of a look at, the folklore, the mythology, the practices, the very human stuff that created the idea of the kitchen witch, and that brings us to kitchen type magic, which, again, I think you did a fantastic job. It was really fun and interesting to read.
Thank you so much. I love that story about, I gasped out loud. And I choked on my coffee when you said that. Was brilliant. That was, I suppose in a funny way, it reflects kind of my personality quite a lot. I am absolutely shocking at following a recipe of any kind. Like, I never have the right things. I always leave something out. Like, I always get it wrong, in quotation marks. Yeah. And I think for the many reasons I wrote Kitchen Witch, one is that, when the kind of the magical story perhaps behind some of the herbs, I mean, much as you did in Green, your Green Witch book, the kind of the magical properties of these herbs, or a story behind something, and then it's kind of up to you to bring it together, and that's a really nice way, because it doesn't matter in a sense, how your recipe, you can use whatever you have around you, because there's magic in all of it. Like, every food, every kitchen, every person has the magic of, memories or folklore or stories. So absolutely, anything you bring, you're bringing your own magic. We all bring our own magic. I think that's the one of the many ideas behind the book, is that
you don't have to be, this professional chef or someone who spends all their time cooking, or you don't have to do all of that to kind of understand kitchen witchery, and why I feel like Kitchen Witch is almost feels redundant. I feel like the kitchen is just so important in witchcraft in general. It becomes this gathering place, this meeting place. It's where so many of our magical tools and herbs and everything live, and all of our ancient witch tools, our cauldrons, our wands, our spoons, our brooms, they're all kitchen stuff. Which again was part of what I liked about it, is that it really opened that up to anybody who's got a kitchen,
That's everybody, and that's perfect. You don't have to be an amazing baker, or, you know, have all the herbs growing in your garden, or any of those things. You know, you can bring magic in so many forms. And you're right, it's the kitchen witchcraft. It is just, you know, I could have just called it witchcraft, you know, because it is, you know, it is just that. But it was fun. The word kitchen witch has got some very nice positive connotations, which is quite nice.
It does.
That kind of, you know, it was a weaving of sort of some of the more serious elements and kind of some of the slightly more lighter and fun ones. So kind of bringing that all together in as best I could.
Yeah, and I think you did a great job. One thing I enjoyed about the book was right at the beginning, and then, you know, as you go through, you make it clear that there is definitely a focus on women and the practices of women as they relate to witches and also to kitchens, because I mean, there's just no denying that there is a very serious connection there. And this is something that came up a few times throughout the book. You know, there's Margaret Murray and her witch cult, which, you know, everybody's got an opinion. I don't think the accuracy, I guess you could say, of her research really matters. I think the fact that she wrote it and published it when she did is what is very important. You know, it's a important part of history. Why was it so important for you to make it clear that although this is open to everybody can be a witch, you can't deny this connection between women and food and kitchens and witchcraft and even, you know, the label of witchcraft that is kind of cast on people?
Yeah, I think it was so important to me for lots of reasons, but women being forgotten through history is just such a thing, and it's exhausting, and it's tedious, and it's angering, and it's kind of, even just in so many ways, you know, women kind of quietly doing this amazing work in the kitchen from this, like, the beginning of time, you know, preserving food, baking food, you know, sowing seeds, and kind of they just quietly got on with it. And you know, their names weren't remembered for that, and that it is very sad. And just kind of moving through the whole story, you know, we're far more likely to know the names of the witch finders than we are the actual witches, or we know the authors of the Malleus Maleficarum, and we talk about them a lot, even though that was just, you know, literally everything that was just a pile of crap. Like, it's funny, and there's some great stories, but it's all complete bollocks, basically. Yeah. So it's just kind of that the women's names get forgotten, and the guys' names seem to kind of carry through, even when they're doing awful things or they're writing ridiculous things. So it was just that kind of attempt in some small way just to say their names, you know, to kind of bring them a little bit to the fore, just to respect some of the things they achieved, some of the things they've done, and obviously some of those names are just lost to history, which is very sad. But in some small way, it's good to just remember that women were a part of it, obviously. But
right. But and you mentioned it in the book, and I love it, because this is something I say all the time, is that, you know, when we talk about famous chefs now, and we talk about working in kitchens now, you know, you've got your Gordon Ramsays and your Anthony Bourdains, you've got a lot of men in the kitchen, which is not a bad thing. It's wonderful, and they're great, and, you know, all of that's fantastic. But it is telling to me that when it comes to personal lives, and even, you know, the old sexist get back in the kitchen and make me a sandwich, when it comes to that, the kitchen is a woman's domain. But as soon as it becomes something professional and profitable and, you know, famous, it's men that are the main you know, voices and faces that you have here. And I saw it. Yeah, I was like, oh my God, I totally say that all the time.
Yeah, it's like their names, their figures, you know, loom large over kind of celebrity cooking and things. And yet, you know, in most homes, you know, if you kind of percentage wise, in the home, it's women who are doing the cooking and a lot of the kind of the primary caring of the family, and kind of, again, quietly in the background, we kind of we don't see it, and we chronically undervalue it. Like carers in general, like people in caring roles are just hugely underpaid and underappreciated. And
Agreed.
here are these celebrity chefs making millions, and it's just, oh, you know.
Yeah, it's like, I'm so happy for you, and also I really hate it. Like and I think that's an important thing to get across, because that happens not just in not just in the kitchen, not just with food, but even even in the witchy sphere. Witchcraft really is something that is tied so closely with women and with women's history and with women's practices. Every resurgence of witchcraft, in the last 21st and the 20th century also always happens within a wave of feminism, right?
Absolutely.
But still, tarot, we didn't talk about the female artist behind the most popular tarot deck for, almost a century. We just didn't talk about her at all.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing.
Changing the name to that was really recent, wasn't it? It was only like the last few years that they changed and actually had her name in the title.
I think it's like the last 10 years. We've actually started to say, men have gotten really famous for this, the Aleister Crowleys and the Gerald Gardners, but there really are other people in the background, unfortunately, that made it happen, and it's often women.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember where this came from, and as best we can. I know the history is dappled, if that's the appropriate word for it. There's just remnants of history that we're trying to kind of pick through, but women were a big part of it, and I see no problem about sharing that and celebrating that. It's like, we've got a lot to thank women for. Again, absolutely. Obvious, just saying really obvious things.
Absolutely. And a lot of the history in your book was very interesting. I love the history about the alewives and about women brewing beer. This is something I've heard, kind of casually a bunch of times, and to see how many countries and cultures actually had women behind the helm of creating beer, which is now undeniably, tied with masculinity. I was like, this is very interesting. The same pattern happens a lot.
It's a lot of repeating. I'm just nodding. Sorry, I'm just nodding on a podcast. It's stupid, but
I lost my train of thought.
Repeats. You see it repeating about women creating something amazing, and then kind of oftentimes men kind of coming in and making it a business or monetizing it in some way, and it just kind
of thanks.
Kind of and then excluding women from it as well, which is the kind of the hilarious thing. It's like, oh, well done, darling, well done, love, we'll take it from here, out you go. And it's just kind of women sort of dismissed as the old wives tales, and kind of she's just a crazy old lady, or she's just a babbling crone or whatever, and kind of made kind of ridiculous. And it's like, we effing started this. Don't act like we don't have this knowledge. Like, so it's that kind of, all that wisdom kind of taken, and then they are just thrown out, and it's just
it's a real bummer, honestly.
It is. It was a real interesting journey with the book, because there were times when I just got really angry, and there were some kind of ranty paragraphs my editor had to kind of take out, because she's like, this is just you being angry at people. And I'm like, I know, but I'm so angry. So I had moments of being really furious, moments of being very kind of like the weight of it. I so wanted to do as, to honor these women and to do them as much justice as I could within the realms of the book. And kind of, there's like this extreme pressure of like, God, is it going to be good enough to do this? And, and obviously, no book is perfect, but you try your best and just kind of do the best you can. But so there's some really hilarious bits in it. There's some really beautiful stories, and there's also some really angering, horrifying bits in it as well, which is witchcraft, really, isn't it? It's the light and the dark. Okay, I'm going to do this like you're talking to me, so I'm going to sound like an absolute weirdo, but we'll just go with it, gorgeous. We're going to go with it. So, the question we got cut off on was my favourite folk tale. So I'll just start at the beginning. Oh, God. So working with folktales was really fun and really interesting, and it was a real honour to bring in folk and fairy tales from various cultures. I tried to stick with my kind of homelands as much as possible, but there are a few other ones just because they're so fantastic that it was I couldn't resist bringing them in. My favourite folktale, and this changes very regularly because they're all special in their own way, and each one kind of speaks to something about how in some time, in some culture, how we viewed the witch. And they can be very different images in different cultures. They can be someone who offers sage advice. There can be something to be feared. And that also in turn reflects the kind of the fears and hopes of different communities. And the witch has always kind of embodied these elements of kind of superstition and kind of fear of the unknown as well. But sorry, I've digressed. My favourite folktale at the moment, I think, is in England we have a superstition that when you eat eggs, you should crush the eggshell after you've eaten the egg, because witches use these eggshells as boats. And if they can use an eggshell as a boat onto the ocean, they can cause havoc to sailors and ships. But the specific folktale in Kitchen Witch is actually painting the witch in a very positive light. So a young girl decides actually she's not going to crush her eggshell, she's going to offer it up instead to the witch, because why shouldn't the witches have boats? And the witch is very grateful, and then in turn the girl's good deed is reflected when the witch saves the girl from a flood. So that's a really nice one, and a good reminder of, I suppose, the fact that not all witches are to be feared, obviously, but also fairy tales. We often think of the witch being the kind of the baddie, and there are actually lots of fairy tales where they are not, which is good because it reminds us that the witch is not just one thing. There are many things. Okay, so that's the favourite folklore bit. The next question would be, foods in my practice. So it was really nice to go through spices and things that I use in my kind of day-to-day practice, just in a very kind of, mundane magic kind of way, just in like day-to-day, but that is part of the fun, I think. So certainly cardamom is something that I love very much in my coffee, and when I brew my French press coffee in the morning, I just put a cardamom pod in the coffee in the morning. And my boyfriend used to work in Saudi Arabia, and cardamom is very popular there in their coffee, and it's very much representative of a culture of being a host and being very welcoming and kind of raising kind of a good start, a positive start for the day. So cardamom is one I use quite a lot. I have a lot of rosemary in my garden, and that is always a nice one with its beautiful connections of water, of flow, of kind of finding ease in your day, which I love. Rosemary, the name means it's drawn from Ros Marinus, which means the dew of the sea. So it's a beautiful connections with water and the ocean, which is, finding our flow in the day is always a positive thing. I'm trying to think of the other ones that we have. I might actually, if you don't mind, just have a quick. I have a really terrible memory, which is why I write things down in books, because then I can remember these things and go back to them and be like, oh, that was really interesting. Well done, me. No, I don't say that. But let's see. Gooseberries. So gooseberries, I adore gooseberries. They're very prevalent here in England, I suppose you would say. And actually, when I lived in Boston in Massachusetts for a year, I remember desperately trying to find gooseberries, and it was really hard, and I don't even know if they must grow in America, but I couldn't find them, and that was kind of sad for me. I'm going to just read, it's not too long, so I'll read you the gooseberry bit if you don't mind. Gooseberries. Crisp, tart berries, some of the earliest of the season. They grow on prickly bushes, and the cultivation of gooseberries was first recorded in England as far back as 1276. this long history of gooseberries in the UK means they have had plenty of time to pick up a great number of local folk names and lore. Dayberry, goggle, honeyblob, feeberry, dewberry, wineberry, and goosegoggs. Especially in Somerset, we call them then. My dad still says goosegoggs. If British children ask where babies come from, they might once have been told that they can be found under a gooseberry bush. This could be connected to the Victorian flower meaning of the blossom. It means anticipation. And on the Isle of Wight, which is a very lovely island off the south coast of England, the gooseberry wife was a figure in tales told to children, warning that if they went out into the garden, the gooseberry wife, portrayed as a large caterpillar, would catch them. The gooseberry wife protects the green gooseberries, perhaps making sure they aren't picked too early. In Germany, gooseberry bushes were planted around cow fields to help keep out witches on Walpurgisnacht. More on this celebration later in the book. Perhaps because of those thorny branches. And as the first fruit of summer, ripening as early as May, gooseberries are popular in the UK at the religious festival of Witchin, also known as Pentecost. This is near the end of May, and the first gooseberries are often eaten in pies. Added with seasonal milk and cream, the Witchin feasts would have been quite a treat. So that one is just relevant to me because my gooseberries are ripening in the garden right now, and I reckon in about a week they'll be ready to eat, and I'm very excited because I adore gooseberries and very much anticipation for them. All of the foods, I tried to make most of the foods in the book ones that we are kind of familiar with, things like apples and spices, because, as we said at the beginning, kind of kitchen witchcraft is in essence just witchcraft. It all began in the kitchen, and it all began with just foods we eat day to day, and that's, I think, how it should be. So it's not about buying special foods or finding special foods or spices. It's about seeing the magic in the ones that you already have. So magic in the everyday. Okay, so next is what would you like people to take away from this book? It's a really good question. There's a lot in the book. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of joyful and enchanting stories. There's a lot of challenging history in the realms of women's stories being forgotten, of accused witches and the horrors that they had to endure, and that awfulness of being othered, of these women and men who were kind of portrayed as something other. You know, they kind of lived on the outskirts. They did strange things with herbs. They had knowledge of old ways that no one could quite remember. They told stories of myth and magic. And for that, some respected them, some sought to learn from them, but a lot of them were victimized as being strange or odd or in league with the devil or up to no good. So there's a lot of light and dark within the book, I suppose. So if I could pick one thing to take away from the book, I suppose I've already said embrace the magic of the everyday, which I think is part of the magic of kitchen witchery, but also to enjoy and to seek out perhaps the stories behind what a kitchen witch is. And again, we spoke earlier, a lot of kitchen witch books are mainly the recipes, which are lovely, and that's how you can be a kitchen witch right now, today, which is wonderful. But also we can dive so much deeper into the magical history of food, the stories behind food and witches and magic, that it deepens the flavor. It makes it a richer brew to know the history. And it is my hope that Kitchen Witch goes some way into bringing to light the history, the good and the bad, and helping us move forward in a place of magic and joy. There you go. That was not very succinct, but a really good question. And then I'm going to pretend that you're going to say, as we come to the end, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us, or how do you connect? And I'll say, Yeah, sure. I'd love to meet you guys online. So you can find me on Instagram at Yoga for Witches. It's all one word. I regularly give away free books at solstice and special occasions. So do join me on Instagram. Also, all my books can be found, all the usual kind of big online retailers, but also direct from Womancraft Publishing, which is my beautiful publisher from Ireland, and they have a wealth of beautiful and magical books. So always worth checking them out, and supporting an indie publisher is always a wonderful thing. And you get bookmarks as well if you and you get signed copies. So it's always better to order from the publisher if you can, or go to your local bookshop and ask them to order it in, because supporting your local bookstore it's never been more important. So I'm all for doing that. So you can buy all my books. So there's Yoga for Witches, Yin Magic, and the latest, Kitchen Witch, all available from Womancraft Publishing. And yeah, do say hello on Instagram. That's always fun. And via Instagram, you'll find other things like this, my website and my YouTube channel, and kind of some fun other things going on. Thank you so much for having me, Paige. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for everyone listening. It's been really fun to journey through folklore and magic and witches with you. And I really hope that you have a gorgeous day. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you so much to Sarah Robinson, not only for coming on the show, but for being such a good sport when I had, a massive tech failure. She even offered to record answers to questions on her own. And I'm really grateful for that, because I loved her answers and her insights. She really was a delight to talk with, and as you heard, she's wonderful to listen to. And I loved the personal bits and the personal stories and stuff that she injected into her answers, like with the cardamom and the coffee, which I also do and highly recommend. It's very tasty. And the gooseberries. That's something I relate to. I didn't move quite so far as to leave the continent, but when I moved out to Vancouver, which is the other side of the country, I'm kind of in the middle now. This was the coast. It struck me how different food was, and I kind of realized how many things I had assumed were everywhere and were really kind of specific to the place I live. That can be kind of jarring. I loved those stories because that really is an important element of this book. It's stories and it's folklore and it's feelings and emotions about food and kitchens and home, and that's what I really liked about it. That was the thing I liked most about the book. I got pretty lucky because she actually recorded herself reading a few more passages from the book, including the story of the little girl who saves her eggshells instead of crushing them. So those will be available this week exclusively for my Patreon supporters as a special thanks for all of their generosity. So if you'd like a little bit of bonus content, you can go to patreon.com/thefatfeministwitch and sign up at any of the donation levels, even $1, and you will get access to this bonus content. As you heard in my conversation with Sarah, when it comes to kitchen witchcraft, that's really just witchcraft. So many of our tools and ingredients come primarily from the kitchen, like cauldrons, brooms, salt, herbs like rosemary and lavender, and most spells are even written like recipes. The kitchen, whether or not it is made explicit, is at the heart of most of the witchcraft you find in your favorite books or videos or social media posts. One tool in particular from the kitchen that has long been a part of my own personal practice and that of witches and magical people throughout history is jars and bottles. As a kid and a new witch, I didn't have a lot of money to buy a lot of the, the really cool witchy altar stuff that you find in all of the books and all of the photos and things like that. So I had to settle with what I could take from our own kitchen, what I could make myself, what I could get for free from other people, and of course what I could get for cheap at yard sales or thrift stores or things like that. So jars and canisters in beautiful multicolors of glass, or that had been handmade in a pottery class, or that were in strange novelty shapes that no one could really figure out how to use, were some of my absolute favorites. I still actually have a set of green glass jars in the shape of hearts with real cork stoppers in them. They were clearly made to be lamps, though I've never used them for that because I didn't want to sacrifice the cork. I might do that in the future, but I didn't want to sacrifice the cork at the time. So I've always used them to hold herbs or salts or, spells with little pieces of paper and things like that. They are still some of my favorite items, and they have been on my altar since before I was in high school. And I found those at a thrift store for $1 for both. I liked spells that were contained in jars and bottles because they were creative. I could look at them, I could see what was inside, but they were also safe from the outside world. As a kid, I didn't live alone, of course. I lived with a family, and using jars and bottles made sure other people couldn't really touch it, that I could tuck it away if I wanted to, but that I could still see my spell. Or if it was something like clay or ceramic, those were really great for hiding things. So some of my more secretive spells ended up in canisters like that. I also, most of the books I read as a kid, they were full of the correspondence lists, like what certain herbs and crystals and candle colors and things mean. So color was always something that I was very aware of in my practice. And colored glass was not an easy way to include it, but a special way. You know what I mean? You didn't always find colored glass that wasn't maybe an amber or a green from a wine bottle or a beer bottle or something like that. So colored glass was always really special. And I always made sure to put those colors to good use. I also really loved being able to recycle jars and bottles and things like that, because it felt like I was doing my part for the earth. It felt like that added a really good type of energy to my spell. I think what I still like most about jar and bottle spells is that they're such a common household item. They're one of those things that almost everyone can get a hold of, even if they don't have money. It's something that you can find, you can recycle, you can rescue from the bin. They're so accessible to people. But especially with things like a mason jar, they really are a symbol of an abundant home and having enough food and sharing with others. Same with things like champagne bottles. That's a really great symbol of celebration. Perfume bottles are very glamorous, and you can find old perfume bottles that have been thrown out. So I think what I like so much about that style of magic is how open-ended and accessible it is to everybody. All of this, of course, is leading up to me telling you about my new book called The Spell Jar Book for Beginners. I'm super excited about it. It actually came out at the end of June, but I was sick and I wasn't able to get involved with the marketing, so I haven't been able to talk about it much. I actually meant to put out a whole episode on jar and bottle magic and talk about the book ages ago. Likewise, I meant to put out this whole episode with Sarah quite a while ago. But it works out that both topics seem to bounce off each other very well. What's great about the fact that I am so late to this party is that it means the book is already out. So if you like the sounds of the book, you don't have to pre-order it. It's already out there, and you can find the links to get yourself a copy in the description of this episode and on my website already. Maybe I'm biased, but I think it's pretty great. I am actually pretty excited about this book. I love jar and bottle spells. And I really let myself go a little bit further when it came with the creativity. I wasn't sure about writing a book for beginners. It's been so long since I was a beginner. I love to help beginners. I know that a lot of people who find my show and find value in it are very new to witchcraft. But something I've noticed about beginner books, especially lately, is that they're very, very limited. And on one hand, when you're new, it's better to start with the basics. It's better to start working with things that you can get a hold of. It's better to start with smaller spells that have no or less, I guess, quote unquote consequences or negative blowback. I get all of that. But there's also this kind of common thing I've seen with witches where they remain a beginner for a very long time because they never know when it's appropriate to move forward or what even moving forward means. I don't think that to be a beginner means that you have to stick with I swear last year I bought a book and every single spell in the book used some combination of like rose quartz, lavender, sage, and a white candle. You know, sometimes there was a bottle or jar in there, sometimes there was a meditation, sometimes there was a yoga pose, I mean, whatever. But it was they were all the same. And I think we've kind of done a disservice to beginners there by making them think that the weird and wacky and even slightly dangerous stuff is just completely out of reach for them. So I wanted to create a book that had a combination of the basics and the classics and the traditional kind of jar and bottle spells with some things that were new and different and a little bit creative. I wanted to make sure that some of the ingredients were kind of odd or kind of special. So I let myself get a little bit extra creative, and I made some spells in there that might seem like they're not actually for beginners. But to that I say, why does a beginner have to stick with something easy? You know, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of challenge as a beginner. Likewise, there's nothing that says that a beginner has to stick with incredibly boring spells with incredibly boring ingredients. You know, I love myself some lavender and some rose quartz and some white candles, but that is not all that is out there. So I really want to encourage some witches to get fucking weird is basically one of my goals here. So like, for example, one of the spells in the book, it's actually my favorite spell in the book. It uses a bunch of pieces and cards and things from the game Monopoly. Part of the reason it's my favorite is because that's real fun. And another part is because that is a very anti-capitalist spell, and I'm really hoping to radicalize some like children or new witches or something with it. So keep fingers crossed. Another uses a kind of rare-ish collector's item that is known as uranium glass. This has become kind of popular on the internet. If you guys are someone who is interested in like vintage or retro collectibles, or who likes really weird or ugly things, you might have seen uranium glass online. So this is glass that is kind of there's no other way to describe it really. It's kind of a sickly yellow type color, and that's because it's colored with trace amounts of very real uranium in it. These were made in the early 20th century. Their creation kind of fell out after the Depression, although using uranium to color dishes and pottery actually goes all the way back to ancient Rome. So this was not like some newfangled wacky concept in the time of the A-bomb, right? This is something kind of with a historical basis. What's really interesting about uranium glass, besides the fact that it has a safe amount of uranium, so you can eat off of it just fine, but it fluoresces or glows like alien green under black light. Very, very cool. This is obviously not something that everyone has access to. Of course, it's a collector's item. It's vintage. It's not being made anymore. But can you think of any cooler material to help you connect with the planetary magic of Uranus, which is what the spell is for? So that one strays a little further from our traditional kitchen witchery, but most of the spells in the book can be done with stuff that you already have in your cupboards. Even if you're not a beginner to witchcraft or to witch bottles and jars and things like that, I'm really hoping that there's something that you can get out of the book. I did try to write something that's fairly different and new, and that can help you, get your creative juices flowing. I had this idea when I was writing the Grimoire Journal, which kind of tells people how to create spells for themselves, create their own spells. It's like a journal. I thought, wouldn't it be great if in a regular witch book that has a bunch of spells, there were also these kind of DIY spells that taught you how to create one for yourself. So I put that into practice in the spell jar book for beginners. The last spell in every single chapter is one of these DIY spells. So instead of just writing out a recipe for you, I give you an idea for a spell, a topic, a theme, and then I list recommended items. So, I use those correspondence lists. I recommend certain herbs and tell you exactly why. I recommend different crystals, different tools, different little ritual aspects. And I explain what those mean. Some of these spells are fairly personal. So one is about, it's called a nourishment jar. And it's about dealing with some of your feelings and your relationship with food. This is a really personal topic, right? And I don't think there is any one spell that I could write that would work for everyone. I think that is so personal that is a spell everyone has to create for themselves. So I give you a sample ritual. I tell you all the ways to make it, but really how you actually go about it and what you do with the jar after are all up to you. There's also a ready-made spell a little bit later in the book that's kind of related about dealing with the fear of food insecurity, which is something I have personal experience with. Not trying to minimize it and saying, you just cast a spell and everything will be okay. But it is something that really helped me because I try out every single spell that I put in my books, I promise you. So I'm fairly excited about this book. It is a little bit different. I was able to do things a little bit differently, do things my own way, and my editor really just kind of let me go with it. And I'm pretty grateful for that. So you can find the Spell Jar book for beginners at any big online book retailer, your Amazons, Indigos, Barnes & Nobles, what have you. And I would be really, really happy if you would request it at your local library and at independent witch shops. So, that way everyone can get a hold of it and some real witches can make some money off of it. I'd love that. If you've read it and you liked it, leaving a review on Goodreads or Amazon or your blog or YouTube channel, whatever, all actually does help get the book out there, and I very much appreciate it. I try not to get too obsessed with checking my reviews, so I don't do it constantly, but I always see them, take note of where they are, and very much appreciate the time and effort put into them. Even if you didn't like the book and you review it poorly, I'm okay with that. No book is going to be for everybody, so if you save somebody the $20 or $15 if they're in the US, that is totally okay with me. Either way, I appreciate the time and effort you take in reading and reviewing and sharing the book with others. So that is all that I have for you today, but future episodes of The Fat Feminist Witch are definitely coming if you're not my friends. I have ideas. My next episode is coming out on August 12th. And this is going to be about old psychic hotlines. Psychic hotlines. And the absolute queen of the psychic hotline industry, which is Miss Cleo. Uriah Dale Harris, the woman who played Miss Cleo, because yes, that was a character, actually passed away in 2016. But August 12th is her birthday. So the entire episode will be dedicated to her. Now, for those of you like me who are around in the 90s and remember the name Miss Cleo and have these negative associations, thinking purely of fraudulent psychics, and are a little turned off by this idea, I'm going to give you a quick little fun preview here. Did you know that Uriah was actually a mambo? She was initiated. She was an initiated mambo. And she served as a spiritual guide well after the fall of the Hotline Empire. She still read tarot cards. She still helped people with their spiritual needs. Long after the hotline fell, she never scammed anybody. She was never charged with anything. She didn't get a whole bunch of money. So that is maybe part of the story that you never heard. So no matter what you think you know about Miss Cleo, there is real magic, and more importantly, a real person underneath the surface of that story, and I cannot wait to share it with you all because I think it's going to be a very interesting and fun episode. For a really cool little twist, I had this great idea. Since I'm talking about psychic hotlines, I want to take questions from listeners and answer them using the Miss Cleo Tarot Power Deck. Highly recommend, by the way. The reason I bought it, aside from the nostalgia, is that it was recommended to me by so many professional tarot readers. It's a really great deck. So I want to answer some calls with Miss Cleo's tarot deck. I can't take live calls, of course, but in the description to this episode, you will find a link to my Anchor page. And you'll see a spot there, a button there that says message, and you can leave me a message. So leave me a short recording, like 60 seconds of a question, and I will choose a few to answer on the air in the next episode. And you can find all the details for that on my website at thefatfeministwitch.com. I can't answer health questions. I've never been able to. They make me too nervous. But pretty much any other question is totally fine, and if I pick yours, I will send you an email and let me know that I will be answering your question, and I will make sure that you get to see the actual cards that I pull and not just hear it on the episode. So I hope that I can hear from some of you and answer some questions live on the air like a real psychic hotline. I think that'll be a lot of fun. So I hope you witches all have a really wonderful weekend. August 1st on Monday is the pagan festival of Lammas, or Lunasa, depending on which way you celebrate, which is either a celebration of food and abundance and the first harvest, or of creativity and artistry, workmanship, skills, craftsmanship. So either way, I hope you have a wonderful time. And thank you so much for joining me today. Special thanks to Sarah Robinson, of course, for being such a good sport. To all of my Patreon supporters and those who support me through various means and support the podcast, even though I've taken quite a long hiatus. I am so happy to be back here on the show, talking with you again about witchcraft. And I hope that plenty of you will join me on August 12th as we have a little bit of fun calling up some retro psychic hotlines. To learn more about me or the Fat Feminist Witch Podcast, check out my website at thefatfeministwitch.com or find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. If you like the content here on the show and you want a little bit more, check out my books Green Witchcraft and The Grimoire Journal. Both books are written for witches of all skill levels to help you begin a relationship with the planet, deepen the one you already have, and craft a very personal, magical practice. If you want to support the show, you can make a donation by going to my website and clicking the button that says Buy Me a Coffee, or you can join my private monthly membership group at patreon.com/thefatfeministwitch. For years, you wonderful, die-hard listeners of the Fat Feminist Witch have been asking me where you can get t-shirts, bags, and other swag to represent your love of the Fat Feminist Witch. And I'm so excited to finally tell you that I have Fat Feminist Witch merch or swag, whatever you like to call it, now available from TeePublic. You can get t-shirts that feature the podcast logo, great phrases like ranting, raving, and wand waving, and even little jokes about your extensive witchy book collection. I've got tote bags, t-shirts, custom notebooks, and all sorts of designs I'm adding to and updating all the time. So check out the link in the description for my new TeePublic store where you can get Fat Feminist Witch Podcast swag. When you get it, please take a picture and tag me anywhere on social media. I can't wait to see how great you guys look in it.